Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am back today to share with you guys my top 10 eyeshadow palettes from this past year. I decided to just do a top 10 this year. I didn't try out as many eyeshadow palettes this year as I have in years past, and you guys will see a theme here, which maybe shouldn't be that surprising considering how much my makeup tastes have changed over the past couple of years, but I'm excited to share them all with you guys. I've got a good mix in here from high-end and larger palettes to little tiny palettes from the drugstore that are just $4. It should be a fun one. Before we get into the palettes though, if you are new here, a very special welcome to you. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Make sure your notification bell is turned on. And with that said, let's jump right into it. Okay, so we're gonna start at the bottom with my number 10 palette. And for that, I am going to go with the Makeup by Mario Master Mattes, the Neutrals palette. If you have seen my progression with this palette throughout the year, I wasn't that impressed with it when I first tried it out. Now I will say this, I still think for what this is, although the quality is great, which is part of why it is making into the ranking, I was not that impressed with this palette. I thought it was kind of boring. However, over the course of the year, I have started using this a lot more. It's kind of become a staple palette for me. If I'm not really thinking about my makeup and I just want to throw something into my crease, maybe just use my highlighter on my lid or do something very basic and simple, this actually does work really well for that. I still think it's way expensive, and if I could go back, I probably would not buy this again, but I've used it a ton, and so I felt like it deserved a spot in the top 10 ranking. Not my favorite of my top 10, but one that I have used way more than I thought I would when I first tried it out. Ranked at number 9, I have to go with the Alter Ego Daylight palette. More than anything, I actually don't use this palette all that often because I have the dupe, the Natasha Denona dupe that this palette is duplicating, which is one of my all-time favorite palettes. I love the I Need a Nude palette, which is the one that this one dupes. It did a very good job duping that palette, and I'm so happy to say that there is an affordable alternative for that very expensive palette that I rave about very often. So for those of you that didn't want to pick up that one because it was outside of your budget or just can't stomach spending $69 on an eyeshadow palette, this one is fantastic. I've used all the shades inside here. I've been very happy with them. And if you like your neutrals, this is one of the most perfect neutral palettes in existence. It is such a beautiful palette. This and the original Natasha Denona. Highly, highly recommend. Coming in at number 8, this one kind of surprised me how much I've used this year. This is from Wet n Wild. It's the Always Naked palette. Now this is not a new palette this year, but it's one that I was kind of late to the game trying out. And it's actually a really nice eyeshadow palette from the drugstore. Again, if you like your neutrals. Now this one does lean a little bit warm, but it's actually not as warm as I thought that it would be looking at it. It's just a basic neutral palette. I love the finishes in here. There is a pressed glitter that I don't touch at all. It's a little bit too chunky for me, but everything else in here is a fantastic color and formula. Good range from light to dark, matte to shimmer, just all around a good palette if you like your neutrals that lean a little bit on the warm side. This one's so, so good. Ranked at number 7 is another Alter Ego palette. This one caught me by surprise. This is the Alter Ego Mist Haven palette. This one is meant to be a dupe for the Huda Beauty Grunge palette, which I never had an interest in picking up. I just did not think that was a color story that suited me. I've had mixed reviews with the Huda Beauty larger eyeshadow palettes over the last couple of years, so I kind of just mostly steered clear of them. If I'm gonna spend over $50 on an eyeshadow palette, it's gonna be Natasha Denona. However, this one, though it's not the original Huda Beauty, very much surprised me. I've used this thing so much. It is so, so pretty. The shimmers in here are beautiful. They're very taupey, I would say. And there's a lot in this palette that leans almost purpley and cool, but nothing is overly purple. I actually don't love purple eyeshadows on me or anything that pulls too colorfully purple, but I don't mind a kind of brownie taupe that leans a little bit in that direction. And that's kind of what this palette is. You do get a lot of dark in here, so if you like grungy looks, this is great for that. There's also a lot in here that's not super dark and grungy. I mean, you get a lot of lid shades that are lighter. You get some lighter transition shades and matte lid shades or inner corner shades or highlighting shades that work really well. You get a bit of variety, but nothing's too bold or colorful. It's a very fun palette. It's one that I've been surprised at how much I've been reaching for this. Considering it's not a color story I thought was very me, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how much I've enjoyed this color story. So, okay, ranked at number 6. This is a tiny little palette that I picked up at the drugstore kind of on a whim. It's from the brand Relove by Revolution. This brand I believe you can just find at Walmart, and this is the Coconut Dream Quad. Technically a 4-pound eyeshadow palette. I may not even qualify in these types of videos because it's so small, but I love this palette, you guys. It is so good. It's very basic, but it creates a very good everyday eye that's just effortless and easy. It was $3.98. The shimmers work very well with a brush or with your finger. The mattes are really nice. It's a good warmer neutral palette if you like that type of just simple, I'm barely wearing makeup kind of look, or maybe you're younger, just getting started into makeup. This is such a good little gem. Coming in at number 5, I'm going to go with the ColourPop Stone Cold Fox palette. Now this is another palette that did not release recently. In fact, I think this palette is several years old, and I never was that interested in it because I thought it was just too cool toned for me. It is definitely a cool tone palette. I would say it's a neutral palette with some cool tones in it. There's not a lot of warmth in this palette, but it is stunning. This thing is really, really good. You get a lot of variety. If you like neutral looks that are not warm at all, if you really don't like warm tones, but you also don't like anything too gray or ashy. However, there is a gray in here, but I've never used this gray right here. But other than that, everything else in here I would definitely use. Even the silver is beautiful. A lot of good variety in here. Some good, beautiful shimmery lid shades. You have some good matte shades from light to dark. Even some mid-tone shimmers that are beautiful on the lid. I'm actually wearing this mid-tone shimmer right here on the outer part of my eyelid today. This is a stunning palette. I don't know why I overlooked this for so long. I know there's a lot of other YouTubers that have highly recommended this before. Maybe it is that my tastes are changing as I have moved away from using more kind of colorful or multi-chromed eyeshadows that just don't really suit me now that I'm a little bit older. I'm finding that it's not just warm tones and colors that I like, but I also enjoy neutrals on myself that are starting to lean more cool than they used to. I used to hate cool tones on me, but starting to change just a little bit. Ranked at number 4 and number 3, I want to put a little asterisk by these two and kind of say that they're a tie because I cannot decide which of these palettes I like better. I've had them both for several months. I think they're very similar to each other. They're both very expensive. You definitely do not need them both because of the similarities, but I can't decide which one I like better. There's a couple things I like about one and a couple things I like more about the other. If I absolutely had to decide today, coming in at number 4, I would put the Natasha Denona I Need a Warm palette. This is such a beautiful palette. I really enjoy this one, and I had leaned away from recommending this one over the other because there's 1 or 2 shades in the other palette that I just absolutely adore. However, I've gone back to this one again recently. I've done this several times where I've like used them back and forth to try to decide which one I like better. And once again, this one, especially the lid shimmers in this palette, are so stunning. These ones are a little bit more kind of peachy in tone, almost, I don't know if I'd say pink, although you do get some like, almost like a little bit of a pink reflect in these 2 shimmers down here that is beautiful on the eyelid. I also love that you get this kind of slip cream matte shade in the corner here that's more of like a creamy matte. I love those kind of formulas, especially for my older eyelids. It's beautiful, it's rich, it's pigmented, so much fun to work with. The only shade I don't love in here is this kind of duochrome or trichrome right here. I just don't love those kind of shades on me anymore. I find them to be a little bit too flashy, but man, you guys, this palette is so, so good. I absolutely love it. However, we're gonna say at number 3, I'm gonna go with the Natasha Denona Golden palette. This is another one that is so beautiful. Now this one is more of a true brown, true gold, whereas the other one has more kind of peach tones in it. And there are just a couple things that I particularly like in this one. I love this dark kind of cooler brown right here. It's really great for smoking out your look or just giving you a little bit of drama or dimension. The other thing I especially love in this palette is this shade right here. This is a creamy kind of ivory matte shade that is gorgeous on the inner lid. If you guys heard me raving about that coconut shade from Sydney Grace for about 1.5 years, which I still love, by the way, this is basically a duplicate for that shade in a slightly creamier formula. This does a fantastic job at brightening up the inner part of your eyelid, especially if you have smaller eyes or if you have really dark shadows and not just your under eye area, but kind of this pocket right here. This is gonna brighten those right up. Now, you can't just do that with any white. If you have a white that's more of a blue-based white, the blue is going to peek through the white and you're almost going to be left with a brighter version of the blue that you had there before. If that's an issue you deal with, you do need just a tiny bit of yellow in your shade to kind of get that same effect, and this does such a good job at that. I can use it on its own, or I can put a little bit of like one of these glitter toppers on top of it, and it's just so stunning. I sometimes will reach into this palette just for that shade alone because it's so effective. But in addition to that, you get some fantastic transition shades, you get some basic kind of warmer neutrals, and beautiful kind of champagnes and golds that aren't too brassy. It's a perfect palette, honestly. They did such a good job at both of these. I still wouldn't recommend buying them both because I think they're similar enough that you don't, I mean, they're $69 a piece. So again, I've said this before, if you're on a budget, maybe wait till Alter Ego, hopefully, dupes these palettes. But I've got to hand it to Natasha Denona. These are both stunning. I love them both. I've used them a ton. Ranked at number 2, for those of you that got a little heartburn over the $69 Natasha Denona palettes, this one will be a bit of a relief for you. This is from the brand Pretty Smart. This is their Celebrity Artist palette. This one is in 103. You guys, this thing is phenomenal. Now it's just a four shade palette. It looks very basic, which again, I feel like I've said that about a lot of these palettes. Clearly, this is the trend I'm moving in. I know some of you are a little bit dismayed about that, but I can't help it, you guys. This is just part of getting older, maybe. Anyways, this palette is so good. Now, they have a couple of other shade options. They all seemed a little bit cool and kind of purpley to me. This color story is perfectly done. You do only get one shimmer in here. It's this one right here. It's quite bright and icy. So try using this more sparingly, maybe with a fluffy brush. It is stunning. I love this transition shade right here. It's one of those shades that seems so basic and simple, but it's beautiful. It's warm, but it's not too warm. It has a little bit of red in it, but it's still brown and kind of neutral. I love it. These formulas I think are so surprisingly good. Considering this came from a tiny little new brand at the drugstore, I mean, the section that this brand has in my Walmart is about 6 inches wide. They don't have a lot of things to offer, but I've been so impressed with several things from them. And this eyeshadow palette is one of the things that has impressed me the most. If you like small palettes that are very simple and just kind of, you don't have to think much to use them, this gives you everything you would need to create the most simple everyday look, or even go a little bit smoky with this shade right here, or even line with it. It's stunning. It is the one that I'm wearing on my eyes today, with the exception of a little bit of a shimmer that I have on the center of my lid, but I wear it on its own all the time. This is one of my most reached for palettes over the last 7 or 8. I think I tried this back in the spring, I believe, and it's been on my desk or in my top drawer ever since. I absolutely love this thing. It's so good. And that brings me to my number 1 palette, and this one is another smaller eyeshadow palette, and it's the Natasha Denona My Mini Dream palette. I love these little mini palettes from Natasha Denona. They are a little bit more expensive now. They're now $27. A couple of years ago, they were $25. I don't know why that bothers me. I know it's only $2, but I feel a little bit more heartburn recommending these at $27 than I did at $25 for some reason. However, this thing is amazing. This is like the most perfect eyeshadow palette or look in one stop that you could ever ask for. If you're into neutrals that lean a little bit on the cool tone side but aren't too cool, this is perfect for that. It has so many, okay, no, obviously not so many. There are 5 shades in here, Mandy. That's not so many. Let's rephrase that. This has 5 of the most perfectly curated shades ever. They're fantastic. The shimmers that you get are perfect. This one's nice and bright for the inner part of the lid. This one's a good basic kind of taupey brown for the center of the lid that's not too dark. The mattes they included in here, this one is so dark and rich and pigmented. If you really want to make some drama and smoke things out, you can. And then these 2 transition shades, if you have very fair skin, you're gonna love this shade right here. But this one works really well as well if you want something just kind of like a half level deeper. I love this thing. Every time I use this palette, I mean, it creates the same look every time you use it basically, but it's that kind of look that's just perfect. You look polished and flawless. You don't have to work very hard or think very much. And for those of you that like that in an eyeshadow palette, sometimes when you look at something like this, maybe you feel a little bit overwhelmed, you are going to love this little gem. It is so, I can't criticize anything about this. Formulas, colors, it's the most perfectly little tiny curated palette that I have ever seen in my whole life. And with that, those are my top 10 eyeshadow palettes for 2024. What'd you guys think of this one? Are you surprised by any of these? Maybe you saw the theme here of mostly neutral and kind of boring eyeshadow palettes. Clearly, I have moved in a direction of keeping things a little bit more simple. I don't completely know what to attribute that to. I don't know if it's a trend thing that things have been moving in or if it's just a personal preference thing. I definitely think that's part of it. I just have kind of settled into this comfortable place with my eyeshadows that I don't like to be quite as experimental as I used to be. I know that's probably disappointing to some of you that enjoyed the creative side of my channel and eyeshadow videos from back in the day. Call it my age, this just seems to be the direction that we're going in. But for my other neutral lovers out there, hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Let me give you one last reminder. If you haven't yet subscribed, please be sure to do that before you leave, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.